recording first. There you go. Go ahead, Dinah.
Abba Yahuwah, I thank you. I thank you that you are great, mighty, and awesome. I thank you, Father, that you have seen fit to bring us here again today. I thank you, Father, that those of us who are gathered and those who will hear truth. And I thank you, Father, for truth. I thank you, Father, that you are truth. And I thank you, Father, for all that will be said today. I pray that that Brother Eric will bring forth your message unhindered, Father, and I thank you in Yeshua's name I pray, amen.
This will be the number 17 and 18 of this particular series that we're labeling Alef Lamed Yod Hei, which would be pronounced like Eliyah. And that's the phrase, as we mentioned, was back in, it was Malachi, wasn't it? Where it says, like the last verse of the Old Testament, or the next to last verse, that I think it was Paul Wilbur, I think, wrote a song called These Are the Days of Elijah. What does that mean? The days of Elijah. Well, that word Alef Lamed Yod Hei is translated Elijah. But again, we're looking at the spelling of words. That's the primary concern of this whole study that we're doing. So Aleph being a prefix means first person, present tense of identity and intent. When I say present tense, it's like I am, I will. So when you have in Exodus 3 at the burning bush, where you have Moshe saying to the one speaking to him through this, via the conduit of this bush, whether it was an angel, a malach, a messenger, or a voice, or some kind of apparition that doesn't really say, but it talked through the Hasanah. That's another study that we did about what does that even mean. Maybe he talked through the Hey Samach Nun Hey. The point is, he said, who shall I say sent me? And he said, tell them Ehyeh sent you. And then he says, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. And so Ehyeh can be seen as a kind of geometrically drawn as a dot, and Asher is a straight line, and then you have another dot. So this concept of the dot, that's pretty one-dimensional. It either exists or it doesn't exist. There's no reference of location, time, or space. There's no, when I say space, between any two dots, they say in geometry, a basic theorem is between any two dots, you can stick an infinite number of other dots. Yeah, but what if the dots are right next to each other? Well, microscopically blow that up and say, well, if there's any space, a dot is so small that you can stick a million, a jillion, an infinite number of other dots can be between any two dots. It's a concept. No matter how close together you draw those two dots, an infinite other number can be jammed in between there, because dots are just this infinitesimally small micro. But a dot's either there or it's not. Hence the concept of this singular dimension. So if you get this word that's Alef Hey Yod Hei, I am. In some translations, they say, I will be what I will be, and some say, I am that I am. What does that even mean? I am that I am. I am that I am, or I am what I am, or I will be whatever I choose to. See, all those extra words aren't there. It's just Ehyeh, Asher, Ehyeh. The word Aleph, Shin, Resh, Asher, literally means a straight line, or it means straight, not even necessarily line. It means straight, valid, authentic, corroborated. So Aleph, Shin, Resh, if the Aleph is the first person, you could say, I am. Yod, Shin, Resh, well, Yod is third person. He will. So Israel is kind of like his straightness, or he will. It's said that Israel is translated as he will contend, or he wrestled with Elohim and prevailed. And it's like, what does that even mean? Well, you have to read into the story of that occasion where Yaakov was wrestling with who? Some say it was the pre-incarnate Christ. At least it was some kind of an angel. How big was the angel? I mean, for Jacob to grab a hold and not let go, I mean, can't an angel just vaporize? I mean, the angel toyed almost, it sounds to me, in the book of Genesis anyway, with Yaakov, Jacob, by enduring, persisting. And then he says, "Oh gosh, it's just about daybreak. I got to get out of here. enough of the games. I've got to go." And Jacob says, "No, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me." And the angel finally just had enough and just tapped and through Jacob's hip, or maybe the sinew of his hip went boing, sprung a tendon or something. And so for the rest of his life, Jacob limped. And it's like, why didn't he do that 3 hours before? Because he was engaging Jacob with all of Jacob's strength. And did Jacob actually prevail against the angel? And it's like, or was the angel just, it's like the father getting down on his knees to play with his children. Children aren't overwhelming him. So, this whole thing is, what do these words mean? What do these things say? What are we really supposed to be learning? Well, the verb action, sense of presence in the design of verbs. See, in English, we have past, present, future, but in Hebrew, it's just present tense or not present tense. And so what I've noticed is that whether the letter tav is in the beginning of the word or the end of the word doesn't really matter. Sometimes it's translated as that same exact sentence as if it was a past tense thing, like Elohim has done wonderful things, or some other translator project a future. He will do wonderful things. And it's like, well, which is it? Is it past or future? In Hebrew, there's absolutely no way to know because they don't think, or the language isn't structured as past, present, future. It's translated as either present tense or not present tense. So the interesting thing about that is that by studying the language, you have to wrap your mind around that, call it a paradigm, that structure, that organization of thought, which says it either is or it ain't. It's either Ehyeh or it's not Ehyeh. It's one-dimensional, like that dot's either there or it's not there. But why is his name a dot, a straight line, Asher, and then a dot? Well, geometrically, graphically, as we've talked before, you can have two dots connected with a line. A Celtic torque, T-O-R-C or T-O-R-Q-U-E, depending on how you'd spell it, men would, that was their uniform of attire, you could say, and that they all wore one of these things. It was a band, a bar of metal that went around the neck, and then a knurl, like a knob. And a young man might just have an orb, small orb, something maybe at each end of this torque. It wasn't connected in the middle. It wasn't exactly like a necklace. And a person who was an official or a military man might have one that was braided or more ornate or perhaps even bejeweled, but that in that culture of the Celts, that was their, that's just what the men wore. You could say, like, well, in modern times, let's say American men will wear a necktie, whether it's a bow or a straight. That's just what you wear. That's, so why would they wear this torque? Where did that come from? Nobody knows. It's all speculation. But I'm just saying the concept of a round knurl, straight line around your neck, and another round knurl, that looks like Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. Well, who were the Celts? Well, those were the rather primitive pagan or heathen people that lived in, well, Ireland, Scotland, England, France, Germany, Europe. And again, the word C-E-L-T in English, Celt, well, the letter C is the third letter. So in Hebrew, Alef Lamed Gimel, that's the Gimel. So it would be the letters what we would call GLT, or Gimel Lamed Tav. Well, Vav Tav is the plural. So sometimes words will be spelled without the Vav dropped in. And then some people say, well, there used to be a Vav and the Masoretic scribes took it out. And so whether or not there was, nobody knows. But there's a few words in today's study where there's just a Tav without a Vav, and it's still rendered as the plural. Maybe it's not the plural. Maybe it's a word spelled with 3 letters without a plural, without the Vav there on purpose. Well, then again, it's up to the mind of the translator what's really going on. So as you're trying to read the text and saying, well, what is this telling me? Is it a plural or is it not? How do you, the translator, choose to regard what this message is? The point, what I'm saying is that if a one sent into exile is Gimel Lamed, and we could draw the Gimel Lamed as this basic shape. The way I'm seeing this is on the left-hand side, and it drops down. That's on the right. That's the Gimel. Modern letter has a foot coming out here. You turn around this way and flip it around. Well, that's the Lamed. So in the Lamed is basically like the head and the neck. If it was a camel, the body would be here with the 4 legs. But what I'm saying is, like, the Gimel and the Lamed are inverse letters of each other. And so you could see the Korean flag with the what's called the yin-yang symbol, a circle with that other little device. So it's got a head and a tail chasing the other head and the tail. Well, Gimel Lamed means revolving door, just like that yin-yang symbol. It also means to go into exile. So if you're in a protected city and you get kicked out and go into exile, you're becoming uncovered. Well, that's the same as something being hidden and becoming discovered. So Gimel Lamed also means to become discovered, like discovering the paleo, for example, discovering hidden treasure, discovering your family roots, history. That's all Gimel Lamed. So it's a revolving door. It's kind of like going around the seasons: winter, summer, spring, autumn, winter, summer, spring. Excuse me, winter, spring, summer, autumn. Anyway, the point is just around and around and around. That's Gimel Lamed. So to be exiled from the land and come back to the land is exactly what we've been reading about in Ezekiel. And it's written about so much, so often. Yahuwah keeps saying it over and over and over, as if to drive home the point that that is the narrative of the play, the dramatic storyboard. It's going to follow this chronology. Well, where does it start? Well, it'd have to start somewhere. Well, it starts with Genesis. That's the big beginning. And so people say, well, was there a previous existence before Genesis? And they say that because Genesis 1 verse 1 and 1 verse 2, that there seems to be a gap. It's called the gap theory, that there might have been thousands of years of people living on the face of the earth between the first verse and the second verse. And it's like, well, nobody knows. That's all speculation. Yeah, but look at the artifacts and look at the giant pyramids. Like they talk about finding pyramids down in Antarctica. And it's like, well, who the heck was down there? And how do you build these things in the ice? Well, it wasn't ice. That was tropical. A long time ago, poles shifted on the earth and whatever. It's all scientific speculation. But what I'm saying is, at least for our reckoning, our thinking, which is according to the Torah that Elohim told Moshe to write. Moshe wrote Genesis 1. Well, did that pre-exist as a... Did Abraham learn that? Did he get taught from Shem, who was really Melchizedek? Or, well, nobody knows how far back anything goes. You know, you got the book of Jasher, you got the book of Jubilees, you got the book of Enoch. How much credibility you can put to those 3? Maybe a lot, maybe very, whatever you want. Whatever you want to assign credibility to that. But the point is, The Torah that we have starts with Genesis, with Bereshit. And so if we want to conform our mind to the Torah of that Yahweh's Avot gave to Moshe for Israel, it doesn't really say, I absolutely believe this is all there is, but it says, I'm gonna conform my consciousness to this paradigm. Okay. Then it's like, well, everybody else can talk about other galaxies and interstellar travel and 60 million years ago on the face of the earth, and it's like, whatever. That's somebody else's story. May be true, may not be true. Why argue about that? But what he gave us is that it starts with Genesis 1, and he pretty quickly gets into Abraham. You know, Noah was around chapter 8, and I think Abraham was around chapter 11, 12. Chapter 15, Elohim tells Abraham, look at the stars. Your family's going to be the way you sefer, which is translated count. But the word sefer doesn't just mean count. It also means connect the dots. Tell a story. Tell a narrative. And he says to Abraham, with the regard or in consideration of the story that you weave in tying these constellations together, so it will be reckoned to your family. And Abraham had just been saying, I don't have any offspring, so I guess I'm going to have to give all my stuff to my best servant, the closest companion I have. And Elohim says, no, you're not going to do that. It's going to be your offspring. And so then he has Ishmael, and then Isaac, and then Keturah had another 6 children. So he had at least 8 kids that we have record of there. But they were all told, well, they're all sons of Abraham. They're all the offspring of Abraham. So there should be some kind of blessing to the earth through all 8 of those children. But some of the enemies of Israel were the offspring of Abraham's children, the bitter enemies. Sons of Lot were Moab and Ammon. Midian was one of the other offsprings of Abraham. And it's like, so it's all this family feud thing going on, really. But my point is, if we're going to say, well, okay, if I want to be Israel, if I want to be Yahuwah's people, Am Israel, Ayin Mem, Yod Shin Resh, Alef Lamed. What is an Ayin Mem? Well, it's not just a nation. That could be Aleph Mem or could be Goy, but Ayin Mem means kinsfolk, common yoke. So Ayin Mem can be translated as the word with. Ayin Lamed can be translated as the word with. But Ayin Lamed, also meaning a yoke, aliyah, is to be lifted up, to be raised up to the highest possible promotion of success. That's aliyah. So to make aliyah, meaning you go back to the land, even if you just go visit as a tourist, or whether you go to live there, that's called making aliyah, which is like, hey, I've done the greatest thing possible. And it's going back to that land that we call Israel, the state of Israel today. But the point is, how do we understand the consciousness of what it means to be the people of Yah? So if you could say, well, I'm going to be my greatest aspiration in my existence is to become the bride of Christ. Well, that was the ultimate ideal that I had been raised to believe. And then I remember hearing one lady once say, she was regarded by herself as well as some others as being a prophetic prophetess or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, she said, yeah, you could be his bride if you want. I'm his wife. And it's like, well, gee, how do you get that? She was married to a human also, but it's like this frame of mind. It's like, what's really going on here? And then there was the 5-fold ministry talked about in the New Testament, where you've got apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors and teachers. It's like, yeah, but the teachers, that's kind of the low on the echelon. They're not graded like that. They're graded, apostles. Hey, well, in the Presbyterian mind, there's no more apostles. That was first century. The prophets, Old Testament stuff. And then all of a sudden, back in the 1970s, it's like, hey, there's apostles. What? Where'd they come from? How can there be apostles? How can there be prophets? That was a whole different dispensation. And those guys don't even exist anymore. The Holy Spirit stopped doing that kind of business these days. Well, apparently not. Well, wait a minute. Unless those are bogus, are those real positions or not? There's evangelists. There's Billy Graham and Spurgeon and Billy Sunday and other big names that you can think of, perhaps authors, perhaps musicians that come to mind present age. But are those guys just doing a job, or they have the mantle? Are they given the unction, the Masa Yahweh? Is the Masa of Yahweh put on them to deliver a certain message? Well, that's kind of what Elijah was. And then I've heard somebody the other day saying there's a certain caliber of prophets, like the big three of Elijah, Jeremiah, and Isaiah. Those are known as the major prophets. And you've got the minor prophets, Zechariah, Malachi, Habakkuk, Obadiah, those guys. But today, there are some people kicking around doing stuff, talking, that are of the same caliber as these major prophets, Elijah, Jeremiah, Isaiah. It's like, what makes the difference? If these are the days of Elijah, what does that even mean? Well, the days of Alef Lamed Yod Hei, I could read as the Aleph, I am in existence, being, like that two-dimensional instead of three. I mean, it exists or it doesn't. It's either there or it's not. And it's either present tense or it's not present tense. Like the sense of time. It's not past, present, future. It's either there or it's not. So if the Aleph goes back to this frame of mind of the Almighty himself saying, I am that I am, and if I wasn't, then it's not. And it's like, what's that frame of mind? That frame of mind says it's always who you are right now. So when we talked last week or two, both times, about Ezekiel 33, seen in this reference, he's saying if the righteous man, that means he is righteous, doing righteous things. And then for some reason he starts doing wicked things, none of his righteousness will be remembered. Why? Because, well, wait a minute, I used to. No, there is no past. It's either you're doing it or you're not. You're either righteous or you're not. You're either righteous or you're wicked. Yeah, but I'm only doing, no, there's no yeah buts. You're either doing righteousness, therefore you're righteous, or you're doing wickedness. Well, what's righteous? So then we've talked about this before, where it says in the epistles of John, as well as it talks about it in Psalms and Proverbs quite a bit, that Deuteronomy talks about this, that righteousness is doing what Yahuwah said. Said to who? The whole world? Said to Israel. So if we have to focus, instead of saying, yeah, but what about him? And it's like, it's not, yeah, about what about him? It's what about me? So if I want to be Yahweh's people, it doesn't matter what other people think. It doesn't matter how old the world really is. It doesn't matter who used to live here. It doesn't matter if there's space aliens and Nephilim and Bigfoots. Whether or not they exist isn't my concern unless I bump into one of them. And then it's like, well, is that a blue beam holographic projection? Is that a hallucination in my own mind? Did they dump some stuff in my food, or none of that matters other than present tense. What's my consciousness? Yahweh El-Hi. Yahweh is my Elohim. This is my consciousness. Kadosh Ani. I am Kadosh, which means his sanctified, set apart, special, attended to as his betrothed unto Yahweh, El-Hi, that's my Allah, Zavot. And the Zavot is the title that he's given himself, which means he will make stand his oath. Or it's also the word for Zavot, armies and legions. So it's translated master of legion, but the word master is not in there. That's an expression of a consciousness. It's either present tense or it's not. Pretty one-dimensional. So for me to say, well, if Yahuwah, in his telling him his identity to Moshe, see, he didn't say, this is who I am. He didn't say that. What he said when Moshe said, who shall I say sent me? He said, tell him Ehyeh sent you. Tell him Ehyeh sent you. Why? See, it gets into more than just I am or even the one-dimensional. So if you look at Alef Hey Yod Hey, somebody asked me to write things down, which I used to do, which I haven't done so much, on a whiteboard. I'll have to get a whiteboard set up here, but for now, Alef Hey Yod Hey, that's the Ehyeh. And just as a reference, Yod Hey Vav Hey is different. See, Aleph starts with I will, and the verb Hey Yod Hey or Hey Vav Hey are both two different tenses or two different, what do you call it? Anyway, two different ways of expressing the same verb of existence. But if Aleph is I am, if that's first person and Yod is third person, then technically Yahweh means he will Haya, which is Hauah. Is that to cause to exist, or he will exist, or he will make everything that does exist? But what about Haya here? I will, or I do exist, or I sustain existence, or how do you read in that? You might be able to read into that a whole bunch of different ways. But I could look at it, if I start reading backwards, I could say to express, or to reveal, or to the wind that blows. What does the letter Hey mean? Make evident, declare, disclose, to uncover or discover that which was otherwise hidden. So it's expressing, it's revealing, it's disclosing, it's making known, making evident. What? Well, what's the Yod? It's the strong, powerful hand. So it's the hand of the creator, the hand of the artist, that hand of Elohim, the one who throws out his arm and scatters the seed, and by that same strong arm will reach out and grab all the ones of the future generations and pull them back to the land, like we read last week, that what he said exactly what he was going to do. That's all wrapped up in this picture of the Yod, the hand that builds, holds, owns, and ruins or destroys or builds or throws it away, pulls it back. All that's in this strong arm of the Yod. But the Yod is the third letter after Hey. Well, something is expressed. And then is that something Yoded? What's expressed? Aleph. Well, the word spelled Alef Hey, we can look up in the dictionary, and it basically means here, which is like, well, this. What this? Well, so see, if Aleph is the silent letter, Aleph is the silent letter. And as we talked about, Aleph is unfathomable, incomprehensible, the eternal. Well, if the Aleph is the eternal, where does it start in Bereshit? With the letter Bet. So the letter Bet, because it's an object, it means house, it means in, with, among, through, on, against. It's like it's this reference of one thing to another. So this consciousness of betness is that it's there, it's identifiable, it's locatable. So now it deals with time and space, because now that it exists, you could say, what about before it existed? So it sets up this concept of time, even if there was no time. But Aleph is silent. Aleph is unidentifiable, because as soon as you identify Aleph, now it's in a Bet form, because Bet is something you can identify. So it's like, oh, what's all this trickery? It's like, no, it's not trickery. It's the consciousness built into the Aleph Bet, which is an expression of how is the universe built? So talking about this thing about John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word. What word? Well, it's got to be the Aleph Bet. And that this word is with Elohim. Well, if it says this, that it's with, well, that the letter Bet literally as a prefix letter means the word with. So does Ayin Lamed or Ayin Mem. But bet is the way you say with. You put bet, and then you'd write the word Elohim, with Elohim. But then it says it is Elohim. Well, to be is the Aleph. So why didn't it say if the isness is the Aleph, if Aleph comes first, why didn't 1 John 1 or the Gospel of John 1:1 say, in the beginning, and what's the word? And the word is Elohim, and then the word became with Elohim. It didn't say that. And it's like, why? Well, we could read that as a mystery. Why did it say it's with Elohim and that it is Elohim? If I choose to read reference of letters to that, I could say, well, the word with is essentially the essence of the letter bet, and the be is the letter Aleph. And what's the word bet Aleph spell? It means to arrive, to enter, to come into, to import, bring something in. These are the days of Elijah. The days are coming. That's the word bet Aleph or bet vav Aleph, maybe even bet yod Aleph. You'll see that word used a number of times in these Ezekiel 37, 38, 39. Why did it say this word is coming? This word is designed to enter. Enter what? All we have reference of is here or not here. So if here is the bet realm, the universe, the cosmos, my body, the house, what's not here? If you could picture a planet inside a universe, a baby inside a womb, is that like time inside of a womb of what's outside of it? No time. Well, where's the past and where's the future? Where's eternity past and eternity future? That's still a reference of time. If there's no time, then somehow the realm of time and space has to exist like an egg with this whole universe inside of it, inside some other place, or the yolk inside of the egg, or again, there's these pictures that our mind, because our mind is built according to this word, we're trapped by even thinking. We can't think outside of this cosmos that we've been given. Everything else, it just becomes imaginary speculations. We're necessarily locked into the structure of the word, which became the expression of all the material things of the universe, which itself, the word then became one, a human that walked amongst us, and that's Yahusha, going on with John chapter 1. So if the word is the Hebrew alphabet, then something about that Hebrew alphabet is the skeleton, is the fractal pattern of everything. So to be able to read in this Hebrew alphabet, Aleph means I am, but Aleph also means the eternal, put into this bet zone. Gimmeling is to move. Gimel itself means camel, so the name of the letter happening to be an animal, what does the animal do? It's a transport vessel. It moves, it traverses like a truck, carrying things from here to there and back again. And the word gimel is used in, well, gimel mem lamed. Well, gimel lamed is the word gal. You know, in Hebrew, the ones that were known as the gal, gimel lamed, and then plural, vav tav, were the galut, the galut. Well, if you drop that u, it's gimel lamed tav. Well, that's where you get the word Galatians, galat, and the word Celt, just changing the G to the C, which would be the English or the Latin way. And it's like, are those in ancient times were the ones that became known as Celts? Are they the lost tribes of Israel, having been taken into the dispersion, lost their identity, forgotten their history? And when Yahweh said, you don't want to listen to my words, you care nothing about my Torah, okay, fine, go serve your other gods. Goodbye. I'm turning away from you and leaving until the day that you guys come back. And you're not even allowed to come back until at least 2,730 years. Goodbye. Is that the real story of the family history? The great curse imposed, laid down as this blanket of oppression, obscurity, obfuscation that Yahweh put upon his people. You cannot come back to me. I'm not going to pay any attention. 2,730 years. When my parents, boy, we did something wrong and go stand in the corner or go to your room for, 15 minutes or an hour and a half or whatever the penalty was. It's like, okay, can I come out? No, get back in the corner, nose in the corner, or go back to your room. It's like unrelenting, because what was said was what was said. And so when Elohim says, I said it, that's what it is. He's not going to change his word. He's not going to change his mind. There is a couple places where he said, if I had intended a great evil upon people, a great calamity of destruction, and then the people change their heart, and so I relent. See, that's not the same thing as changing his mind. So there's changing his mind. There's saying this is coming, but you guys can still detour it, block it by changing your hearts, like you did with Nineveh. So, it's up to us to try to figure out what are the rules of this engagement, this game, this earthly venture that we're all in. How does this stuff work? Who is the big eye in the sky, the big orchestrator of all events? If he's orchestrating the events, how do we know what's in our league, what's in our domain, our jurisdiction to affect, our bailiwick? What do we have charge over, and what's his? There's this verse, I think it was Psalms 37, verse 23. I think it was my wife looked it up yesterday. She said, a righteous man's ways are ordered or established by Yahweh. What is that word for order or established? Well, Ayin Mem Dalet Amad, that could be established or placed. Ordered, well, that's the word dabarti, that's translated as the order, like the order of Melchizedek. That's a different matter. But so looking it up, it's actually Zadi Ayin Dalet. Ordered, established. Is that to say, well, he makes stuff happen? Well, but if we're looking at the spelling of words, Zadi is this sprout, this flourishing, and Ayin Dalet, yeah, that's the word for witness and testimony. Ayin Dalet Yod is treasure and bejewelment, but Ayin Dalet is a measure in time. It's translated until or while, perhaps even as long as. So when it says until the time, Ayin Dalet hyphened with Ayin Tav, that word until is Ayin Dalet. So what would be a Zadi of Ayin Dalet? And if it says that a man's steps are Zion or Zadi Ayin Daleted by Yahuwah, it's like, well, look at nature. What is springtime? Aviv. Why is it Aviv? Alef Bet Yod Bet. Well, Bet is a gateway or an entrance. Alef Bet Yod Bet. Alef Bet is father, but it's also verdure and youthfulness and full of energy, and it means to have desire and passion. And there was we just mentioned it the other week. It wasn't the almond tree, I don't think. Anyway, there's a certain tree which is, maybe it was the almond. It was the first one to bud in the spring. It's like it's just waiting for that sun, for the equinox, for the temperatures to change, and all of a sudden, wham! It's thrown out a blossom. It's like, shakad means industrious and diligent. Looking for the first occasion to, wow, just take that. It's kind of like if somebody said, I remember back on with this congregation observing Yom Kippur, and so you don't eat starting in the evening and until the next evening. It's like, oh man, you're so hungry. It's like, really, it's only a day. But boy, soon as that was it, let's say 6 o'clock, soon as it was 5:59, wham, 6 o'clock. Whoa, open up the refrigerator. Everybody has some kind of an oneg, or they kind of like a potluck meal, or they took off and went down to the local buffet, well, you know how they have these restaurants where you can eat all you want in this big, huge, massive, all kinds of different food. And like, oh, craving. And it's like, well, wait a second. Now it's like, give it a few more minutes. I'll eat something later. You know, I don't want to be so craving. Oh, I got to eat something. It's like, well, wait a second. It's a picture. Are you raring to go at the first glimpse? Bam, like horses out of the gate. The gate opens and those horses are flying down the track in a horse race. Or are you like, I'll let the other ones run and then I'll take off and enjoy the scenery without the pressure. What's our zeal? So I could sit here and say, you know, if indeed there was an imposed curse upon the house of Israel for 2,730 years, and I'd never even heard about that till a guy in 2004 was talking about it. And it's like, what? I only heard part of his talk, and then it's like, it just kind of was floating around in my consciousness somewhere. And then a few years later, I thought, what was that he was talking about? And then I tried to do some research, because then there was this computer online stuff that didn't exist before. And then all of a sudden, hey, you can research. And when I found out what is this 2,730-year curse, how come nobody's talking about it? It's like, this is a spectacular, incredible occasion, like the gate opened on the jail. And everybody's still sitting there because they don't realize the gate was open. They might not have even realized they were in jail and that there was a gate and that there's a possibility of a different reality that nobody's experienced ever before. Because if the lockdown started 721 BC, when Assyria took over the northern tribes, and part of the curse was that they'd lose their identity. They'd lose any recollection that Yahweh was ever their Elohim, that they had any inheritance of the land, that they had anything to do with being the offspring, the lineage of Abraham, and that as far as they know, they're Celts or they're Vikings or they're Mongolians or they're Mayans or they're Indonesians or Aboriginal. It doesn't exist. And all of a sudden in 2010, it's like, not only is there something to this, but it's written into the fabric of the universe. And it's written into the story that are really up in the stars. And it's written in the alphabet. And it is the fundamental narrative storyline of all reality, at least of our consciousness of what does it mean to be Adam, Israel, walking the face of the earth as the Yahuwah. Well, what's the alphabet say? Well, Aleph is an ox, and Bet is a house, and Gimel's a camel, Dalit's a door. So we could read the pictures by the names of the letters, but then there's Yahusha, who is the word coming down from the heavens to the earth. Aleph coming into the universe, Bet Gimeling through the birth canal of the Dalit pelvic door of the Hey woman, who would be the Vav, the man who would then be distinguished yet put to the weapon slain, Zion, Het thrown into the tomb, the round rock, Tet rolled in front of it, and that by his own hand he has accomplished and chosen to do this, and yet he will have the power and capacity to prevail and contain it all, Kaf Lamed, because this is what's written in the Torah, having the authority to, from the chaotic mem of destruction, noon, this new type of life, of vitality, branching out, somic ion, to move into this flying pay, grave opening up, bursting out, Zadi, raising up under this spectacular reshness, koofing into this reshness to the sheen, the glory of El Shaddai on this display, Tav, and that's the targeted, sworn, this is what it is. Well, that narrative story of Yahusha's actual journey, mission, voyage from the heavenlies, Aleph, through this earth realm, back to the Tavness of been there, done that, accomplished the project as intended. Well, that's a spectacular frame of mind. Why isn't Mr. JC seen as that guy from every Jew who has a regard of the Hebrew language being sacred? It's not even identifiable. And yet, what does that mean? And it's like, well, how do you know that's what the letters mean? Well, because there's this correlation of the Moedim being the letters from between Het and Zadi, Het Tet Yod, Pesach, Kaf Lamed, Chag HaMatzot, Mem Nun, Shavuot, Samik, Yom Teruah, Ayin, Yom Kippur, Pei, Sukkot, Zadi, Shmini Atzeret. And the closer you look, it's all right there. So that, hence the letters of the alphabet are locked in and calibrated by the very Moedim, the objects of testimony, the times of his bejewelment, Moed, Moedi, Moedim. And when the whole thing fits into play, you realize, is this an uncovery? Is this a discovery? Is this a coming back? Or did he already give this to people? Well, if he gave it to our forefathers, where is it retained? Where is any of this held or kept, even locked up, that we can break it open and see by the forefathers of our faith? Is it written in the New Testament anywhere? And I've tried to look, and it's like, well, I can see places where, I think it was Diana was saying that reading through Matthew and I've read through and looked at different chapter sequences and different storylines in different places, Book of Acts, and I can see the alphabetic sequence, but my question was, can I see it on purpose? Did Paul write with intention the way that Solomon in Proverbs 31, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, each letter saying, here's a Ashat Chayil, a virtuous woman or valiant wife, or depending on how you want to translate that. And every phrase started with the next letter of the alphabet. David in Psalm 119. Numerous other places, somebody very intentionally took the alphabet and boom, 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 write a, as it were, like an acronym with it. Did anybody do that in the New Testament? And I couldn't really find that it was blatantly clear that they were trying to do that on purpose. It might be there, but I just haven't stumbled across it. So it's like, so this whole thing that we're talking about, has it been kept from the blatantly clear right there on the table, front and center? This is the centerpiece. Let's sit around the table and talk about it. Has it been kept away on purpose all this time? And when Elohim said to his people, I'm gonna turn my face and walk away, and I'm not even gonna, you're not going to be able to maintain my audience of you. You don't listen to my voice, I'm not listening to your voice. La, la, la. You can yell and scream because your enemies are terribly tearing you apart, killing you, torturing you, and I can't hear you because you won't listen to my voice. You're on your own. How can he do such a thing? He told us that's what was going to happen. But he also told us when we come back to listen to his voice, everything changes. It's like, well, what are the terms of that happening? It fits the model of Yeshua coming out of the grave. So if I can read Yeshua coming out of the grave is not the end of the world. It's at the Pei Zadi, Kuf. Pei, the grave opening up. Zadi, blossoming, bursting out. Kuf, rising up, ascending to a different status of reshness. If I can read that in this alphabetic narrative, and if that's a model of Israel, and Israel was kicked out into dispersion because they wouldn't listen to his voice. Well, Pei is a mouth. What comes out of your mouth? His voice. So I can read, well, the mouth opening and the Zadi flourishing is not just Yeshua coming out of the grave, but it's the language coming back to flourishing and fruitation. It's his words coming back to our consciousness. Oh, that's right. That's what he meant. That's how it worked. Hey, look, and it's our eyes opening up. So ayin zadi, that word for wood that we talked about last week, Ezekiel 37, take one piece of wood, right, for Yehuda and his comrades, another piece of wood for Ephraim or Israel and his comrades, and hold the two in your hand, and it'll become one. One what? Well, the word ayin zadi is not just wood, but it also means to take counsel. It also means eyes opened up, but it also means inherent. Remember, nun ayin vav zadi means inherent, or come to the agreement together, all 12 tribes. This is the inherent reality. This is the inherent responsibility and obligation of who we are and what we're supposed to do. And we can have different flavors of, like each one of the 12 stones was of a different essence, a different name, a different luster, they were all supposed to be Orim, which means with light, Aleph Vav Resh Yod Mem, and they're all supposed to be Tamim, Tav Mem, Yod Mem, which means perfect specimens, or Mentumim, but that's been translated as being two special, almost mystical, magical stones that had special powers. And it's like, wait a second, what if those are just two words that are adjectives of the condition of the heart, the condition of the behavior of all 12 tribes working Yechad, Yod Chet Dalet, together as a confederacy, you might say. So if the 12 tribes who got separated and dispersed and scattered across the face of the earth, like we were just reading in Ezekiel, and Yahuwah with his strong arm is going to grab them and bring them back, which is what he said he was going to do before getting into Ezekiel 38, which we're going to look at in the next hour here in just a moment. Then that has to follow somehow the pattern of Yahusha's life as we have it recorded in the gospel. Well, what happened? When he was about 30 years old, and let's go with Michael Rood's assessment that it was a 70-week ministry, not 3.5 years. That was figured out by somebody else who would fit in with the other 3.5 weeks of the tribulation. And so maybe that's different too, but let's just say he had a 70-week ministry, at least. So Yahushua has a 70-week ministry, and then he gets crucified and entombed for 3 days and 3 nights. Okay, then he comes out of the grave. And then what? Well, then he hangs around for 40 more days. 40. Why 40? Well, Mem is 40, Nun is 50. Mem is a gestation period. Nun being 50, Jubilee, that's also 50, and that's like birthing into a whole nother, jumping out into a whole nother thing. So I'm just saying, we could sit there and say, well, what do the letters mean? What are the numbers equivalent to? And why did he pick this number or that number? And how do we set up a mind according to the way all these alphabet letters are laid out in sequence? So to be doing this, what I'm doing now is saying I'm choosing to make the structured order of the Hebrew alphabet. I'm not just assuming, but I'm laying it down as a postulate, as a given, that the Hebrew alphabet is of Yahuwah's design as a prophetic oracle, a prophetic statement, an Ahmad Basodi, where he says, who's been made aware of my secret, the foundation, Ayin Mem Dalet, Bat Somic Vav Dalet Yod, Ahmad Basodi. Set in Jeremiah 23, I think that is. Anyway, but the point is, this is the basic foundation upon which everything else is built. So if I say that, I'm going to consider that to be Hebrew alphabet, and it's validated by the names of the letters. It's validated by the constellations, if we can appropriate value, and it's validated by the Moedim, which we have talked about appropriating its value of this equals this and this equals this. It's validated by Yeshua's own gospel narrative story of the crucifixion and the resurrection. Numerous other parables all fit in. So it's like, okay, once I get this established in my head, okay, I'm ready, I'm willing to go along with that. Now, what does it say and what can I project onto it? How can I build on this foundation? The word yasod is foundation. And the word Ahmad, Ayin Mem Dalet, are columns established on a solid foundation. So when Yahuwah says, if they've been exposed to my mystery, or if they've been made aware of my Ahmad Basodi, then have them stop. Tell my people to quit sinning intentionally and walk in my ways and do my stuff. Why? That's not the end of the matter. It's the beginning of the matter. It's the beginning of the restoration. It's the beginning of the what? Ezekiel 36 and 37, which then throws us up into 38 after that. And so if, like I just saw a couple of videos where somebody was talking about Ezekiel 38, this big war, Gog and Magog, and there's this war, and then there's another coming one, 5 minutes. And it's like, wait a minute, some stuff hasn't happened yet. The little skirmish, the big conflict going on in Ukraine and Israel right now can't, according to my estimation, cannot be Gog and Magog. Why? We'll talk about that. But it can't be because he hasn't set it up yet for it to be. Well, what does that mean? He said, as we read last week, Yahuwah, with a strong, powerful arm, just threw everybody across the face of the earth. And with that very next verse, with that same powerful arm, he's going to grab everybody and bring them back to the same land that he kicked them out of. Looks like it's the land of Israel. And I know some people have said, well, it's the Philippines. Some people say it's Africa. Some people say it's North America. But the artifacts that have been found with things written, ancient Hebrew, looks like that land over there. So until we know otherwise, I'm in my frame of mind, I'm just going with that. Well, where does that leave us? Well, if I sit here and say, his language has to be restored, that's P17. His people have to come back to walking in his ways and listening to his voice. That's P17. We got to be brought back out of the dispersion. That's P17. Just like Yahusha came out of the grave. And he didn't immediately fly up into the heavens. Well, some people say he went back and forth a few times, but as the story narrative goes, he hung around for 40 days. Then he floated up, coofed up into the clouds, and the angel said he's going to come back the same way. And then that throws you back into, is that Revelation 19? But let's look at this. So if we look at Ezekiel 36, and it says in verse 23, you guys got kicked out of the land, Israel, that was especially talking about the northern 10 tribes, but because you had profaned my reputation in the eyes of the nations. In other words, to be on the land of Israel, part of the deal, part of the consideration is, its purpose is to make known, which would be to know is Dalet Ayin or Dalet Ayin Tav, or to make known experientially is Yada, Yod Dalet Ayin. To make an announcement is Nun Ayin Dalet. Nun Ayin Vav Dalet, Tav Yod. I've made myself known. And you'd pronounce that as Nun Vav Ayin Dalet, Tav Yod, Nudati. Nudity, I've made myself known. It's interesting, the English word ties into the Hebrew, and it's like Yahweh said to Israel, only you have I made myself known to, and your obligation is to make my identity known to all of the people who dwell on the earth. And fundamentally, if Israel listens to his voice and correctly, appropriately, yashar, straightly says this is the nature and identity of Yahuwah, no other Elohim, no other ceremonies, no other ritual celebrations commemorating something that's not like him. Therefore, Israel's not allowed to have Elohim Akrim, not allowed to learn the celebrations of Egypt and Assyria, or like with Solomon, 1,000 other women with different cultural religious practices. It's like, no, not on the land, not in the land of Israel, only Yahweh. So only the Moedim. Can't do Christmas and Easter and Halloween in the land of Israel, or you're going to get it kicked out. So he gave his identity to Israel, told them to put it on display, and when they distorted it, twisted it, polluted it, they had to get kicked out of the land until they were ready and willing and able to correctly identify him, in which case then he could bring him back to the land. And if that's where we are right now, we're still out here, so we haven't come back to the land yet. So whatever follows after that can't happen. But We're going to pick right up with this thing in Ezekiel 36. We're going to take a break right now.